On the rugged coast of Tasmania, surrounded by cold seas and dense forests, lies the ruins of what was once called Hell on Earth. Its name was Port Arthur. From 1833 to 1877, this was more than a prison. It was an experiment, one designed not just to punish the body, but to break the human mind. When Britain claimed Australia as its penal colony in the late 18th century, thousands of convicts were shipped across oceans. Murderers, thieves, political rebels. Anyone sentenced to transportation found themselves cast into the New World. But among all the prisons built, Port Arthur stood apart. Here, the British Empire sent its worst offenders. Men who had already been convicts, who escaped other prisons, who refused to bend. The journey to Port Arthur was itself a sentence. Cold seas, endless wilderness, and guards who believed mercy was weakness. Once inside, there was no escape. The settlement was surrounded on 3 sides by water, and the 4th by dense bushland filled with guards, dogs, and traps. Even if a man tried to swim for freedom, the freezing currents would drag him under. But it wasn't just the isolation that made Port Arthur infamous. It was the philosophy behind it. In the 1840s, British reformers believed they had found a new way to rehabilitate criminals, not through chains and whips, but through silence and solitude. Port Arthur became the testing ground. Convicts were forced into separate cells, where they spent nearly all hours in silence. They were forbidden to speak to one another. When they attended chapel, they were placed in wooden booths, each man unable to see the others, staring only at the preacher. Guards patrolled the halls with soft shoes to keep the silence unbroken. Even their faces were hidden by masks, so prisoners could not recognize them. The men were stripped not just of freedom, but of identity. To modern ears, silence may sound peaceful, but at Port Arthur, silence was a weapon. Convicts began to lose their grip on reality. Some broke down within weeks, unable to bear the isolation. Others fell into deep depression, staring at the same 4 walls until their minds collapsed inward. There were reports of men screaming uncontrollably at night, clawing at their skin, begging for any sound, even the crack of a whip. To prove the world still existed, the asylum built beside the prison soon filled with inmates who had gone mad. Today, visitors say the asylum is one of the most haunted places in Tasmania. Not all punishments were silent. Port Arthur also relied on hard labor. Convicts cut timber in the forests, dragged stone in the quarries, and built ships for the empire. Their work fueled Britain's reach across the seas. But for many, the endless days of labor under the whip were only a prelude to nights of crushing solitude. Some convicts attempted escape. Most failed. The most infamous was Martin Cash, a bushranger who actually managed to slip past guards and flee into the Tasmanian wilderness. His daring escape became legend. But he was captured and returned proof that Port Arthur's grip was nearly impossible to break. By the late 19th century, Port Arthur's reputation was known across the world. It was not just a prison. It was a machine designed to erase men. Even after it closed in 1877, the site carried an aura of fear. Locals avoided it, calling it cursed ground. The buildings fell into ruin, but the stories remained. And in time, the ruins became something else, a place of ghosts. Visitors to Port Arthur today speak of footsteps in empty corridors, of doors slamming without cause, of cold hands brushing their shoulders. In the asylum, some claim to hear whispers, though the rooms stand empty. One of the most famous tales is of the Blue Lady, a figure in a blue dress seen wandering the ruins. It's believed to be the spirit of a woman connected to the convicts. Others tell of children's voices near the schoolhouse, where the children of prisoners once lived in harsh discipline. Guides on the site openly admit, Port Arthur is not just history. It is haunted history. But perhaps the darkest reminder of its legacy came in modern times. In 1996, Port Arthur became the site of one of Australia's worst tragedies, a mass shooting that claimed 35 lives. The massacre shocked the nation and led to sweeping changes in Australia's gun laws. It was as if the site itself, already steeped in centuries of suffering, refused to let go of its reputation as a place of death. Today, the ruins of Port Arthur stand as a World Heritage Site. Tourists walk its halls, tracing the footsteps of convicts long gone. The chapel, the asylum, the solitary cells. all remain. Echoes of a philosophy that believed silence could reform, but instead destroyed. To some, Port Arthur is a monument to cruelty. To others, it is a warning that when society chooses to erase people instead of understanding them, it builds prisons that echo far beyond their walls. And for those who stand in the ruins at night, hearing whispers in the dark, Port Arthur is more than history. It is a reminder that silence can scream louder than any voice.